Psalm 91 speaks powerfully about God's divine protection, offering comfort and strength to anyone who is facing adversity. The opening verses declare that those who dwell in the secret place of the Most High will find refuge under the shadow of the Almighty. This metaphor of being in the shadow of God signifies a place of safety where no harm can touch us. It's a promise that in times of trouble, God's protective presence is more than enough to shield us from the dangers that surround us. The world is filled with many uncertainties, sickness, calamities, and the invisible spiritual warfare that often seems to strike out of nowhere. Yet, Psalm 91 teaches us that God is our refuge, a fortress that we can run to for safety. No matter what dangers threaten us, whether physical or spiritual, we are not left vulnerable. We are not abandoned to face the storm alone. This is the heart of God's promise. In the face of every fear and every enemy, God is our stronghold. The passage assures us that God will deliver us from the snare of the fowler and from the deadly pestilence. The snare of the fowler refers to the traps set by our enemies, those invisible forces that attempt to entangle us in circumstances beyond our control. It speaks of spiritual traps and temptations that seek to pull us away from God's path. The deadly pestilence represents the various diseases, plagues, or any form of attack that threatens our physical well-being. Yet God promises deliverance from these things. He is the one who has the power to save us from both the seen and the unseen dangers in this world. This protection, however, is not just physical but also spiritual. As believers, we face a very real spiritual battle every day. The enemy's tactics are not always visible to the naked eye, but they are as real as the threats we face in the natural world. Psalm 91 declares that God will protect us from the enemy's attacks, whether in the form of temptation, fear, or discouragement. The enemy may plot against us, but when we take refuge in God, the enemy's schemes will fail. The passage continues to reinforce the idea of God's protection by describing how His truth will be our shield and buckler. A shield is something that defends us from immediate attacks, while a buckler provides complete coverage, guarding us from all sides. God's truth is not just a nice idea, it is a protective force in our lives. It is a shield against lies, confusion, and the deceit of the enemy. When we stand firm on the truth of God's word, we can withstand any attack that comes our way. As the psalm progresses, it paints an even more vivid picture of the protection God provides. It promises that even in the face of terror by night or the arrow that flies by day, God's people are shielded. There are moments in life when we face overwhelming fear of what might happen, fear of the unknown, fear of danger lurking around every corner. But Psalm 91 reassures us that we need not fear. The arrows of fear, doubt, and worry cannot harm us when we take refuge in God's loving arms. God promises to be our shield, protecting us from both the known and the unknown dangers that try to overwhelm our hearts. The psalm goes further to say that 8,000 may fall at your side and 10,000 at your right hand, but it will not come near you. This is a statement of incredible faith and trust in God's power. It's a reminder that although the world may be in chaos and others may suffer from calamities, God's protection surrounds us in such a way that we will not be harmed. In the midst of widespread disaster, those who place their trust in God will remain safe. It is not by our own strength or ability that we are protected, but by the hand of the Almighty. At times, life feels like a battleground, and the threats can seem overwhelming. But Psalm 91 reminds us that God's protection is not just a theoretical promise. It is a real and active force in our lives. We can have peace and confidence because God Himself is the one who stands guard over us. He is not a distant, indifferent God. He is present, watching over us with care, ready to act when danger approaches. We must also understand that this divine protection is not an automatic guarantee for everyone. It is for those who dwell in the secret place of the Most High. This phrase speaks of a relationship with God that is intimate and consistent. It refers to a place of prayer, worship, and communion with God. It is not a surface-level connection, but a deep abiding presence where we find shelter from the storms of life. This is where God promises to protect us as we remain close to Him. To experience the fullness of God's protection, we must seek His presence daily. We must cultivate a lifestyle of trust, prayer, and surrender. The more we dwell in God's presence, the more His protection becomes a reality in our lives. His promises are not just words on a page, they are life-giving truths that provide safety, peace and security in a world that often seems chaotic and uncertain. God's protection is not just a passive form of defense. He actively intervenes in our lives, guiding us, comforting us, and leading us through difficult situations. We are never alone when we trust in His sheltering presence. The storms may rage and the threats may loom, but we are safe in the hands of a faithful, loving God who has promised never to leave us nor forsake us. In conclusion, Psalm 91 is a powerful reminder that in times of trouble, God is our refuge and fortress. We do not need to fear the dangers that may come our way, for God's protection is our shield. We are not defenseless. We are covered by the Almighty, and He is faithful to protect His people from every attack of the enemy. When we dwell in His presence, we can be assured that no harm will come near us, and we will find peace in His divine shelter. The second keynote of Psalm 91 focuses on the importance of faith in God's faithfulness, a central theme that runs throughout the psalm. Faith is not just a passive belief, it is an active trust in the character and promises of God, even when circumstances might seem contrary to His word. Psalm 91 challenges us to look beyond what we see with our eyes and place our confidence in what we know to be true about God, His unwavering faithfulness to His promises. To truly experience the protection and peace described in this psalm, we must first trust in the reliability of God's word. It is easy to place our faith in things that are tangible, the security of our jobs, our financial stability, the health of our bodies, and the relationships we value. But these things are temporary and they can be shaken at any moment. Psalm 91 invites us to place our trust in something far more secure, the living God who has promised to protect us and care for us no matter the storm. Faith is the key that unlocks the power of God's protection in our lives. When we believe that He is our refuge and fortress, we begin to experience His sheltering presence. It's important to note that faith doesn't mean the absence of fear or danger, but rather the confidence that, even in the midst of fear or danger, God is with us, and He will see us through. And that's true. True faith is not about the absence of problems, but about the presence of God's protection in the midst of them. As we place our faith in God, we begin to recognize the many ways He has already worked in our lives. Reflecting on past moments when God has come through for us can strengthen our faith in His future provision. Psalm 91 speaks of God's faithfulness in past tense. He who dwells in the secret place of the Most High shall abide under the shadow of the Almighty. This verse serves as a reminder that God has already shown Himself to be faithful. His protection is not just a future hope, it is a present reality based on His past action. Having faith in God's faithfulness means trusting that He will fulfill His promises, even when we can't see how or when. God's timing is not always our timing, but His faithfulness remains constant. We must resist the temptation to take matters into our own hands when things seem uncertain. Instead, we wait on God, trusting that He is working behind the scenes even when we don't see immediate results. Just as a child trusts a parent even when they cannot fully understand what is happening, we too must trust that God is working in our lives, even if we don't have all the answers right away. This faith also strengthens our hearts when we face challenges. When we believe in God's faithfulness, we know that no matter what we encounter, whether it's a financial crisis, an illness, a relationship issue, or a spiritual struggle, we are not alone. God's promises are our foundation and we stand firm on them. Psalm 91 reassures us that God's protection is not contingent on our own strength abilities. It is not based on our perfection or our merit, but on His character and His covenant with us. He is faithful even when we are not. Faith in God's faithfulness allows us to move forward in peace. It gives us the courage to face life's challenges with a sense of calm and trust, knowing that God is with us every step of the way. Psalm 91 tells us that we do not have to fear the terror by night or the arrow that flies by day because God's protection surrounds us. It encourages us to reject fear, not because we are invincible, but because God is with us, and that makes all the difference. To live out this kind of faith, we must continually remind ourselves of God's promises. Psalm 91 is filled with assurances of God's protection, but we must choose to believe them and internalize them. When we meditate on these promises, they become a source of strength and courage. We learn to see life through the lens of God's faithfulness, trusting that no matter what comes our way, He will deliver us. Moreover, faith in God's faithfulness enables us to live without fear. Fear often holds us back from stepping into God's purpose for our lives, as we worry about what might go wrong. But when we trust in God's protection, we can move forward with confidence, knowing that He will be with us every step of the way. Faith frees us from the chains of fear and opens the door to the abundant life God has for us. Living with this faith requires a constant choice to look beyond our circumstances and focus on God's promise. It requires daily surrender, knowing that we don't have to carry the weight of life's challenges alone. Just as a child knows they are safe in their parents' arms, we too can rest in the arms of our Heavenly Father, trusting that He will protect us from all harm. Ultimately, faith in God's faithfulness is not just about believing that God will protect us from harm, but about believing in His goodness, love, and sovereignty in every area of our life. When we place our trust in God, we are not just trusting Him for protection, but also for provision, guidance, and peace. We trust that He is the author and finisher of our faith, and that every step we take is in His perfect plan. In conclusion, faith in God's faithfulness is the cornerstone of experiencing the protection described in Psalm 91. It is a faith that rests not in our own abilities or circumstances, but in the unshakable promises of a loving and all-powerful God. As we trust in His faithfulness, we experience peace, security, and the assurance that He is with us no matter what. Through this faith, we can walk through life's challenges with the confidence that God will never leave us nor forsake us. The third keynote of Psalm 91 delves into the many blessings and deliverance that come to those who trust in God. This section of the psalm highlights the rewards of dwelling in God's presence and living a life rooted in faith. Psalm 91 not only assures us of God's protection, but also promises a rich outpouring of blessings that flow from a deep, abiding relationship with Him. The psalm reminds us that God's protection is not merely about keeping us safe from harm. It is also about His active provision, deliverance, and favor in our lives. God's promise of deliverance in Psalm 91 is a profound declaration of His ability to rescue His people from any situation. The psalm assures us that when we trust in God, He will deliver us from the snares of the enemy, from sickness and disease, and from all forms of disaster that may strike. This divine deliverance is not based on our own power or merit, but on God's faithfulness to those who trust in Him. Deliverance becomes a natural outcome of our relationship with God. As we remain in His presence, He intervenes on our behalf, guiding us through challenges and rescuing us from situations that seem insurmountable. But deliverance is just the beginning of the blessings that God pours out upon those who trust in Him. Psalm 91 promises a life marked by peace, security, and divine favor. It speaks of God's angels being assigned to guard us, ensuring that we are kept safe in every circumstance. This protection is not just physical, but extends to every area of our lives, emotional, mental, and spiritual. As we trust in God, His divine care and protection extend over our entire being, bringing peace that surpasses understanding. The psalm also promises long life as a reward for those who trust in God and abide in His presence. In verse 16, God declares, "With long life I will satisfy him and show him my salvation." This is a powerful statement of God's favor. Long life in this context is not just about the number of years one lives, but the quality of those years. A life lived in God's protection is a life filled with meaning, purpose, and fulfillment. It is a life free from unnecessary pain, worry, and fear, marked by the peace that only God can provide. This promise of long life is tied to God's ultimate desire for us to experience His salvation, which is the ultimate blessing. God's salvation is not only about deliverance from sin, but also about restoration, wholeness, and the abundant life that comes through knowing Him. Salvation brings freedom from spiritual death, but it also encompasses freedom from every form of bondage, whether physical, emotional, or mental. Psalm 91 assures us that when we place our trust in God, we are not only protected from harm, but also restored to the fullness of life that He intended for us. Moreover, the The blessings of Psalm 91 are not only for us individually, but can overflow into the lives of those around us. As we experience God's protection and favor, our lives become a testimony to His goodness and grace. Our faithfulness to God can have a ripple effect, bringing blessings to our families, communities, and even to nations. The divine protection and favor that we experience can serve as a witness to others, drawing them to the source of our peace and security, God Himself. These blessings also serve to build our faith and deepen our relationship with God. When we see God's hand of deliverance and blessing in our lives, we are reminded of His faithfulness. These experiences strengthen our trust in God, enabling us to face future challenges with even greater confidence. Each victory, each moment of deliverance becomes a building block in our faith, reminding us of the unshakable foundation we have in God's promises. The ultimate blessing, however, is not just physical protection or material prosperity. It is the closeness and intimacy we share with God. The psalm begins by speaking of those who dwell in the secret place of the Most High. And this concept of dwelling speaks to a relationship that is both deep and personal. The blessings promised in Psalm 91 are the fruits of living in a constant, intimate connection with God. It is in His presence that we find true peace, joy, and satisfaction. The psalmist's declaration that he who dwells in the secret place of the Most High is the key to unlocking all of God's blessings and deliverance. When we live close to God, we experience His protection and favor in ways that transcend mere circumstances. In the face of life's uncertainties, Psalm 91 calls us to trust in God's deliverance and blessing. It challenges us to take refuge in His presence, to place our faith in His protection, and to rest in the assurance that He will never leave us nor forsake us. As we dwell in His presence, we find not only safety but also a life filled with purpose, peace, and the abundant blessings of His love. In conclusion, Psalm 91 is a profound promise of God's protection, deliverance, and blessings. When we place our trust in God, we are not just shielded from harm, but are also blessed with peace, long life, and divine favor. These blessings come as a result of dwelling in God's presence and living by faith in His promises. As we continue to trust in God's faithfulness, we will experience His deliverance in every area of our lives, and we will witness His favor overflowing in ways that bring glory to His name.